Okay, we are live. Welcome to the Wildes Cast, MGE's podcast. I have a fascinating fellow, Gershon Distenfeld, who we're going to hear about, when I start interviewing him. Thank you so much for coming, Gershon.
Thank you for having me, Rabbi Wildes.
Really, really a pleasure. Gershon, I'm told that you kept your focus for 3 hours, and at stake in the World Series of Poker event where you would take home more than $200,000. And but your plan apparently was not to take it home, but to give it to charity. Gershon is a senior vice president of Alliance Bernstein, and he also beat out 799 other players and is a graduate from Yeshiva University, my alma mater as well. We welcome you to the Wildes Cast. Thanks so much for being here. So tell me, Gershon, I mean, it's so rare for someone to decide to give their poker winnings to tzedakah, to charity. I mean, where'd you get this idea? Apparently you went into the game with that in mind. Tell us a little about this.
Yeah, I made the final table of a big poker tournament last year, and at the time decided to do this. It's kind of natural, and my wife and I have been very blessed with a lot of financial means. We've been able to give away a lot of money, give away our time as well for worthy causes. So I never I'm what we call a recreational poker player. I play a few times a year. I don't have a full-time job. I have a family. And I never really thought I was going to make money playing poker. I didn't necessarily know if I was going to be good or not. I viewed it more as entertainment dollars that I was going to spend with a hobby. But I figured that, once I did start to make money and made a significant amount of money, I made $125,000 last year and then over $200,000 this year. I said, what better thing to do than not just to give it away, but hopefully try and inspire other people in the poker community, which, as you said, Rabbi Wildes, is not really known necessarily for their philanthropy, to give away some of their money as well.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm going to take a little backtrack, and then we'll get back into the game. You seem like a pretty observant religious Jew. Tell us a little about playing poker and being Jewish, religious. Is that like a Jewish thing or not Jewish thing? I know that the Gemara, the Talmud speaks about not poker per se, about gambling. Have you done a lot of research on that? Like, what's your take on that whole area?
Yeah, I've done some. I mean, like the Gemara talks about someone who's a professional gambler, which is according to the way the Rishonim understand the Gemara. So that's not the case over here. I think poker is actually a poker tournament is very different than normal gambling as well. But that being said, I don't think it's a Jewish value to gamble. I wouldn't. In fact, I'm very explicit. I've said I don't play in home games. I don't think it's good to play among friends. I think it can be a real problem for people to be addicted to gambling. I, again, don't do it as a form of gambling for myself. It's more for me a form of entertainment. It's a challenge, trying to see if I can compete against some of the best players. And that's really not for everyone. I think the what I want to get through to everyone is the message is not that you should strive to be a great poker player like me. And it's not even necessarily that one should give away their winnings in anything, although I do believe everyone should be giving charity each according to his or her ability to do so. But it's really the lesson, I think, here is that wherever one finds themselves in life, you're going to have a hobby, you're going to be put in a circumstance, whatever it is, you have the chance to sanctify God's name, to make a Kiddush Hashem, or, God forbid, the opposite. And, I think that's what I tried to do here, tried to make something that, you're right, Rabbi Wildes, poker is not a holy pursuit, and it's not something, again, I would encourage most people to participate in. But, if you can make a Kiddush Hashem in the poker arena, you should be able to do it really in any arena.
Wow, that's a beautiful message, and it's one of the themes, honestly, underlying a lot of the podcasts, interviews, which is, what do you do and how are you making a Kiddush Hashem in doing so? Which is interesting because you would think something like poker, like gambling, how could you make a Kiddush Hashem out of it? The Talmud says that one of the possible problems with gambling is that you're not contributing to what's called Yeshuvu Shel Olam. You're not kind of building up the world. And that's the reason why, according to that reason, as long as you're not a professional, as long as you're not earning your living gambling, it's okay to gamble because you have another means of building up the world, right? And which is what you're is that what you do now? You're a vice president at Alliance Bernstein. You're in the world of finance.
Yeah, I'm in the world of finance. I co-run a business that manages about $300 billion worth of fixed income securities for clients around the world. But to your point, Rabbi Wildes, life involves risk taking in all different forms. The key is to control it, right? Like anything else in life, you can do something responsibly, or you could let it get out of control. So, I think gambling is a difficult thing because it can become an addiction for many people. So you have to be very, very careful about it. But in measured ways, it, again, as a form of recreation and entertainment for yourself, there's room to permit it.
Wow. And I know they gave the winner a bracelet.
Yep.
You wearing it?
I am wearing it.
Let's see it. Okay. Oh wow, it's actually quite beautiful.
Yeah, it's the most coveted thing in the poker world, the World Series of Poker bracelet. They used to give out 30 or 40 a year, 30 or 40 different tournaments. Now it's up to like 70 or 80. But it's still a lot of poker professionals have not won a bracelet, including, by the way, the guy who coached me. I ended up getting a poker coach who, when he heard I was giving away money to charity, he offered to coach me for free. He's a very accomplished player, but he doesn't have a World Series of Poker bracelet. So it's it's a little surreal that I actually won one, and I don't. Sometimes I wake up in the morning, I'm like, wow, did I really win that? But
you went beyond. I mean, it might have been enough to just announce that you were giving your earnings to charity, which was amazing. But you then went ahead and you took an extra step to ask others to give at least 1% of their earnings to charity. What motivated you to do that? And has there been any response to that call?
Yeah, so when they do what's called as a bracelet ceremony, a day or two after they present you the bracelet, you get to speak for a couple of minutes. And yeah, I used my time to implore others. The message I said to the poker community is, look, we're all very fortunate. You have the fortunate to have the funds, the time, and something we take for granted more than anything often is our health. All those things line up. And on top of that, if we're fortunate enough to make a lot of money, to go deep in a tournament, to win a few $100,000, whatever it is, the least we could do is give some of that back. I said in the ceremony, I said, I prefer 5 or 10%, but I'll take 1%.
Okay. I was going to ask you, I was like, why'd you stop at 1? We believe in 10%.
We do believe in 10%, but again, like this is, I'm trying to get.
Yeah.
I think look, I don't know what anyone does in their private life, but I don't know how charitable each individual is. But I think that if every winning poker player gave away 1% to charity, again, the charity of their choice, what speaks to them, it would go a long way to help make the world a better place. And that's really what Judaism and Yiddishkeit is all about, or at least what it should be about.
That's amazing. Let me ask you a little about the focus. Right, there were 800 people who competed here, and when it's down to you and one other guy in this 3-hour match, tell us how you maintained. I mean, do you get like in a zone? Are you thinking about the people you're going to help? Are you thinking about your family? Like, how do you stay enough to win?
That's a good question. I think it was 3.5 hours. I think with some levity, I was playing against a Belgian guy, nicest guy in the world. We were joking it up. We both got all in against each other. We put our arms around each other to see the result. It was, that's the nice part about poker, the social aspect. So I never like playing online. I like the social aspect of poker, but it was a long match. I didn't feel nervous till the very, very end. I was actually at the last break, right before I won. I had a slight chip lead, and I was still the favorite, but I don't know. I just felt like it's been so long. I didn't feel that confident anymore. I actually called my coach and said, give me a pep talk. He's like, Gershon, you know exactly what to do. And soon after that, I had won it. But it was really surreal. I was in a bit of a daze. I teared up, which is very unlike me for those that know me. But yeah, something I guess one of those dreams that are within reach. You can dream about hitting, the home run in Game 7 of the World Series, but you can practice baseball all day long. Most people aren't going to make it to the major leagues. You can dream about being a great basketball player, but I could practice all day long. And LeBron James, if I played him a million times, he beats me a million times. In poker, I may not be as good as the best players of the world, and I'm sure I'm not. But I have a 30% chance of beating them, 40% chance of beating them. So it's a sport. If you call it a sport, it's a game, whatever. That's it's attainable to reach the highest levels.
Right. And do you have like a poker face? Like, do you have to keep like a certain look, to be able to bluff your opponent?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people have very serious faces. Again, I do it more at levity. I talk a lot at the table. So regardless whether I have a good hand or a bad hand, I'm still yapping it up. And that's considered my poker face. Who knows if it works or not? It's possible I give away what's known as a tell, but hopefully not.
I mean, do you have any, like, I'm thinking about the old, I did a scene, we do some funny spoof little videos to raise money for the organization, MJE. So I did a scene. I was James Bond, Harav Menachem ben Levi Bond, I said. And we did a scene. We turned our MGE room into like a fake casino. And I had all these body movements, facial expressions, do you know when can you tell when you're being bluffed by your opponent?
The good players give what's known as false tells. They'll try and make, you never know if whatever you're seeing is real or not. Look, what poker comes down to more than anything. Yeah, sometimes, if you can read your opponent, that's huge. But more often than not, it's having to understand what's the range of possible holdings that your opponent has given their prior action, and what does your opponent think that you have based on your actions. And you can get into like this game of go around circles in your head. But trying to figure out that puzzle is a big part of what poker is about.
And let me ask you this: do you think it's a good social event? Like I've been tempted over the years. MGE is boasts 344 shidduchs, marriages over the years, and people always ask, yeah, thank God, Bli Ayin Hara. We're 23 years old, and we've just had, we just have events almost every night of the week, and we're reaching out to less affiliated Jewish professionals, 20s and 30s, living in the city or the surrounding areas. And I've been tempted to do a casino night. Do you think that's a good way for people? I'm looking for ways that relax people. Like we do a ski retreat, like Shabbaton every year, and we go up. And I find that when people come for something else and not to meet per se, the pressure's a little lower, and it's easier for people to be themselves and meet and talk. Do you think a casino night would be? Because I was always reticent. I was like, that's a little below industry standard, but it is raising money for tzedakah. It's just an entertainment thing, like you do. It's not, What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the shul that I belong to down in Hollywood, Florida, is doing a poker tournament for charity on Hanukkah. And it fits the criteria of people are not playing for large sums of money, right? Typically, you do something as you just have like a reasonable entry fee into a tournament, and it's a great social event. And people are very much. Yes, I think it's a much more kosher way of playing poker than going into a casino and be very, very disciplined about how you do it. Like I've done it. Again, that's hard to do and not appropriate for most people. But in a environment that's a good environment where you're raising money for charity, it's even better. And you're limiting people's losses, so to speak. That's a much, much healthier way of doing it. I think it's a positive thing to do.
All right, so you do. I'm really thinking.
And I'll make you if you give me enough advance notice, I'll try and attend as well.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, do you get to New York?
I get to New York quite often. I should be there in a couple of weeks. But I lived in New York my whole life. So we moved to Southern Florida about 3 months ago.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
So it's I get to New York quite often, at least once a quarter, maybe more often.
Hollywood's a beautiful neighborhood, beautiful Jewish community there. I would love to do that, and that would actually be a little of a, we're always looking for a little draw, something a little different. Just, and we could say that we have Gershon Distenfeld, the great poker player, coming. That could be very cool. All right, we'll take you up on that.
Great.
Are you concerned? I hear that I didn't see the article, but I'm told that the Wall Street Journal did a story on you.
It did.
And which is that's pretty unbelievable. Were you worried that everyone would know There's a very famous. I'll just tell you quickly. There's a Gemara. The Talmud speaks about different instances when it's okay to lie because of shalom bias. One of the times, we say like change the truth, mishane et shalom, to change the truth. It's actually coming up on one of the Parshiyot, but because we know that the brothers after Yaakov died, basically told Joseph that their father Jacob, when he was alive, commanded him to forgive them, which never happened. And Rashi says that was something they made up. But the Gemara says, actually, the Talmud says that you can lie when you go to someone's home for a Shabbat meal, and they ask you how the meal was. So you don't have to go off and say it was so great. You can even say it wasn't so great. Why? You know the reason? Very interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know the Gemara for Shalom. I assume.
Yeah, the Gemara.
Shalom.
Yeah, no, the Gemara is concerned that if it gets out there that this person is such a good hostess, other people are going to just want to come over, and the person's going to get overwhelmed with Shabbat invitations and Shabbat crashers. We have that issue at MG. So, were you nervous that the Wall Street Journal would, people are going to come flocking to you for handouts?
No, I mean it's happened anyway, even before the Wall Street Journal. But look, I deal with the media a lot in my business job, and this was a very friendly story. This wasn't investigative journalism. This was like kind of a feel good story for the Journal to do. The reporter who did it's one I have a relationship with. I've been quoting many of his articles before, so it was friendly. Like anything, it didn't come out exactly the way I would have portrayed it. But I think all things being considered, it was a really positive article, and I think showed a good side of Orthodox Judaism. I think that one of the this is mentioned in the article, which hopefully Rabbi Wildes will have the time to read at some point. It's a short read. One of the points I made in the article is I think that too often those, certainly the way we're perceived, but even those internal to our community, prioritize ritual over the ben adam lachavero, the interaction between man and man. And not that ritual is not important; it's incredibly important. But it's if you look at the Torah, if you look at the 5 books of Moses, right, there's very, very little about the things that we normally associate with Orthodox Jews. What keeping Shabbat, kashrus, tefillin, 2 psukim in the entire Torah. Yet how many times does it talk about taking care of the yasom, the almana, the orphan, the widow, again and again and again? The first set of laws we get after Mount Sinai is interpersonal dealings, is mishpatim. And I think there's an attitude in the Orthodox community that needs to be corrected. If you put a piece of pork in front of an observant Jew, most of them would recoil from it, would not want to go anywhere near it. Well, when it comes to maybe doing a shady business deal, there's a reason, there's a leniency we can use or whatever. And our rabbis teach us it should be exactly the opposite. Yeah. You're supposed to look at the non-kosher piece of meat and say, that looks really, really good. I'd love to have it, but God said I can't. As opposed to when it comes to someone else's money, that you should recoil from, that you should go far from. So I think that we've lost a little bit in some of our communities. I mean, I don't want to paint with a huge broad brush, but we define a person who is an Orthodox Jew by their ritual observance. And I would argue that being a good, ethical person is at least as important, if not more important.
Yeah, beautifully said, and I appreciate you sharing that. Rabbi Soloveitchik, who I love to quote, famously taught that the reason why we have this crazy rabbinic tradition that when God revealed the 10 Commandments at Har Sinai, they all were revealed simultaneously. They were all said at the same time, which is something which is impossible for a human being. You and I can't say 2 things simultaneously. And, the Rav gave a beautiful explanation because the first mitzvot on the first set of tablets, which pertain to our relationship with God, should not be seen as more important than the second 5 on the second tablet, and vice versa. Because we all pick and choose on some level. We all, say, oh, this God must take seriously, this may not. And I think people do make that association. That if you're an Orthodox Jew, it means that you're more careful about your ritual observance in Adam Lamakum, between yourself and God. but ben adam l'chaver in terms of your ethics and morality. And you said it beautifully. How many times does it say in the Torah to look out for the widow, orphan, and stranger? And v'ahavta et hager, I was just talking to somebody. It says 36 times in the Torah to love the stranger, which is referring to someone who converts to Judaism. How often, and I deal with a lot of converts, do people who are brought into the community from the outside experience alienation and don't get that love? So I think it's really important. Now, how would you encourage people though to give more charity? That is always been a struggle. The organization I run is for 20s and 30s, so people are starting out in their first, second jobs. A lot of my students are paying off loans, and they're eking out a living to be able to afford their tiny little apartment here in Manhattan. And I'm the rabbi. Come on, you got to give 10%. Now, I always tell people it's after taxes. So if you're making $100,000 and Uncle Sam is, to keep it clean, Uncle Sam is taking 50. So then 10% of 50, the $5,000.
That's right.
Now, but when I say that, I sometimes feel like people are going to their hearts are going to stop beating. I'm going to have to get the defibrillators out when I drop that on them, because a lot of our students were not raised in homes where that 10% was like a regular thing. So it's what would you say? Because it's such an important Jewish value to give. Please.
I'd say a couple things, Rabbi Wildes. I'd say one, there's more than one way to give. Not everyone is able to give their money. Not everyone makes a lot of money. Now, of course, one has to prioritize between what are truly luxuries and necessities, but that's a different topic. But you can give your time. You can volunteer to help people. You can, if you have a certain skill set that's in demand. I mean, I know of a friend of mine who's a dentist that goes every year, spends 2 weeks in Israel treating people that can't afford dental care, right? So it's not only money. There's other ways to give back as well. But I think when it comes to money, I think you're right. But I think it starts with the education as youngsters. See, part of the problem is, right, a 10-year-old doesn't have money to give. So no one really preaches it to them. No one's looking for a big donation from the 10-year-old. However, what's the implicit message that they hear? They hear about how important Shabbos is. They hear about how important kashrut is, and how important davening is. And all these things are incredibly important. I don't mean to belittle them. But what they don't hear... And
by the way, they're doing, in the Orthodox world anyway, they're doing Shabbat, they're doing kashrut. They're not giving tzedakah. They're 10.
That's right. Look, and so I think educationally, but look, it gets modeled in the home more than anything. One of the proudest moments my wife and I have had as a parent was when one of our children, for her 8th birthday party, unsolicited, came up to us and said, I'd like to have my party at Tomchei Shabbos where they pack boxes for people that don't have enough food for Shabbos. We didn't even know how she knew about it. But there's a situation as a kid, an 8-year-old kid that has no money to give of her own, but she wanted to help out others. She knew there was a need, wanted to help out others in some way. So look, I think we have to model more of that behavior from a young age. Once you were talking to a 30-year-old already, then to your words very well, you're talking about I'm living in a cramped apartment, I'm not making enough money, where, if no one would, the same person that wouldn't compromise on Shabbat observance, if they have the same attitude with giving some portion, 10%, if they can, they'd find a way.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it can be done in one fell swoop. I think
it's a process. I'll tell you 2 stories. One about you talking about kids, and that's a beautiful story about your daughter. Was that your daughter or your son? You were just saying.
My daughter, one of my daughters.
And there was a guy who was sending one of my supporters for many years. He writes us a nice check every year. And one year he sent it over with his son. He showed up in my office where I'm sitting now. And I called him. I called the father after the son came with the check. And I said, thank you. You could just put it in the mail. It was nice seeing your son. He's like, no, Rabbi, you don't understand. I want my son one day to do what I'm doing. And the only way he's going to see it is if he's part of it. And I remember to this day when I was a kid that I'm from, we mentioned before, I'm from Forest Hills, Queens, and there were occasionally people that would come knocking on our door just looking for mezuzot, and they would knock on the door, and my father, he should live and be well, will always bring me down while he was meeting with someone who came knocking at the door for a donation. He would invite the person in. He would ask me or my brother to go get the person something to drink or eat, always. And it became like a ritual in our home because he wanted us to see, and it has nothing to do with money. It's nothing to do with how much money you have. I'll tell you the other story, which is really powerful to me growing up, is my father's father, who was throughout his life pretty much, a poor person, I would say. Had a small little store, dry goods store in Alphen, Pennsylvania, where my dad's from. And he was the one that drove all the Meshulachim, all of the collectors when they would come from the yeshivot in Israel. Harry Wildes, my father's father, was the one who drove him around. Now, he didn't have a lot to give. He was also the treasurer of the shul, but he was involved in helping to secure it for other people. So I'm sharing this because I want people listening to really take to heart your message of how your message is, okay, you thankfully are financially stable enough to be able to give away all of your poker earnings. That's incredible. But how do we start developing the sense of giving little by little? Is to share stories also about individuals that don't have money that still manage to share something. And I think
100%. I mean, that's the key. You can give in many, many different ways. You can serve your talent, your time, right? My guess is, I don't know your organization that well, Rabbi Wildes, but you have volunteers, I'm sure.
100%.
About all sorts of stuff. But there's no, one doesn't have to look and say, oh my God, I wish I had, more money to give. That's great. And one should find within their own budget more money to give if possible. But for most people, it is more about time. It is more about their skill set, how they can help someone else, make someone else smile, right? You mentioned the widow, the orphan, the convert, right? So many, you mentioned shidduchim before, right? Many converts are not prioritized there. So helping a convert there is I can't imagine of a greater mitzvah.
I mean, there's such opportunities to give, and I put this in my first book. I wrote a book called Beyond the Instant, and the first chapter is on happiness. The studies are so compelling about how much happier people are when they give. Now, do you believe, I'm just curious, there is a verse in the Torah, I forgot the exact pasuk, but I had one of my supporters, I'll mention his name, he was a beloved member of our board, he passed away a few years ago, Meyer Offman of blessed memory. He used to say, Mark, the more I give away, the more I make. And then when he said that, somebody chimed in and said, there's a verse somewhere in the Torah that says that. Have you seen that in your own life, that the more tzedakah you give, the better you do financially?
Well, yeah, that's certainly been the story. I've always, when I wasn't making a lot of money, strove to give away a minimum of 10%. Mm-hmm. And that certainly served me very, very well. But I would bring it back to the point you made also. It's not even the fact that you do better. That's, it is one of the areas maybe the only area you're allowed to test God in. You're allowed to say, God, if I give X amount of money, you should reward me with more money. But isn't it aser to aser, right?
Yeah.
Aser shel aser. Lost my train of thought a second. I was saying, the feeling of giving. It's a joke in my family. When my wife and I, I'll give her, I'll get upset in an expenditure she made, which wasn't a very, I shouldn't say upset. She get upset at me for saying that I get upset. But, I'll question an expenditure we made, and she'll be like, I don't understand. This was like, X amount of dollars. You have no problem writing a 10X check without even thinking about it. And she's right, but there's a fundamental difference. And it's one of the things that you really can't appreciate until you experience it, which is it feels really, really good to give.
Yeah.
It's different. I buy something nice for myself. How long does that make me happy for? It makes me happy for a second. Yeah. When you're in a position to give, and again, it doesn't just have to be with money. when you can make someone's life better, it could be through money, it could be through time, it could be, again, from a skill set that you have. There's nothing that feels better. I think Rabbi Dessler talks about that in his writings.
Yeah.
That the word ahava, right, love, comes from the word hav, to give. The ultimate, everyone thinks that, most people look at a relationship, what can I get out of this relationship? Yeah, I have to give something to get out of it. It's really the opposite. The more you give in a relationship, it's true in a marriage, it's actually true in a business relationship as well. The more you give, the more you actually end up getting in the end.
Yeah, I just jumped while you were speaking. I hope that was okay. I just jumped to get a copy of my book because I found it. Listen to what I wrote here is exactly, Gershon, what you were just saying. I said, scientific studies tell us the very same thing. We benefit neurologically from giving and helping others. The research shows that generosity, whether it's volunteering, like you said, which is really in Hebrew called chesed, and giving charity, which is tzedakah, benefits people of all ages, both physically and physiologically and psychologically. And I quoted here from a study recorded in the Chicago Tribune that said that the benefits of giving are significant. According to these studies, giving lowers blood pressure, lowers risk of dementia, less anxiety and depression, reduced cardiovascular risk, and overall greater happiness. Studies also demonstrate that when we even think about helping other people, we activate a part of the brain called the mesolimbic pathway, responsible for feelings of gratification. Helping others releases happiness chemicals like dopamine, which is an endorphin that blocks pain signals, and oxytocin. That's called the happy hormone, otherwise known as the tranquility hormone. Okay, research shows that even just the thought of giving money to a specific charity. Okay, that's not good enough, guys. But it does. And I'll mention one other thing that Professor Dan Ariely of Behavioral Economic Psychology at Duke said, if you are a recipient of a good deed, you may have a momentary happiness, but long-term happiness is higher if you're the giver. It's exactly what you were just saying.
And I experience it all the time, and it's a great feeling. And we all have our selfish streaks. There's no question about it. We have our own. Everyone has their own needs, but there's nothing like giving to someone else relative to fulfilling your own need. Yeah. And people try it a little more often. Not only would they do better for themselves, but they'd make the world a better place. And that is ultimately what we're here to do.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the time you're giving us and the lesson. Maybe that's a good way to end, to talk a little about Hanukkah's coming up in less than a week. We give gifts to each other on Hanukkah, but I'm wondering if there's a way of encouraging people. They're silly. I don't want to say silly gifts. We give nice little gifts around when we light the menorah, but the greatest gift would be giving the opportunity to another person to give, because of everything we're saying right now. If it really, it also turns your poker playing turned not only into a Kiddush Hashem, but an activity that really benefits you, because it allowed you to make all this money and give that money away. What is a chut? I think that's just incredible. I want to thank you for coming on. If there's anything else you want to share, most of our listeners are in their 20s and 30s, struggling a little with finding that next step in their career, also learning to grow more in their Yiddishkeit. And I think your message of giving and using whatever it is that you're good at, because you're clearly a good poker player. By the way, do you play is there anything else are you good at the blackjack table? And
no, I don't play any more casino games. I play backgammon, not really for money, but I play pretty competitive backgammon. That's actually my first love.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's backgammon. It's not as prestigious as poker. You don't win one of these nice bracelets for that.
Exactly.
But no, I think just encourage. I would continue to encourage people to focus on. I think we spend a lot of time enhancing the ritualistic aspect of our lives. And again, I'll say it for the millionth time. I don't mean to belittle it. It's important, but to enhance all aspects, not just the giving piece, just our relationships with other people. One of the things that struck me a couple of Yom Kippurs ago, as I was thinking about it, the same thing. All the things that we tell each other that we tell God we're going to do better in. We're going to daven better. We're going to learn better. We're going to, keep the Shabbos spirit better, whatever it is. None of that is found in the vidui, in the al-chetz, in the what's the English word?
The confessional.
The confessions of Yom Kippur. It's all about interpersonal relationships, which is very strange because the Mishnah in Yuma tells us that for sins between man and his fellow man, Yom Kippur doesn't forgive unless you go and actually ask forgiveness. So here it is, Yom Kippur already. You're talking to God all day long in shul. You're not really talking to your friends anymore. And you're asking God to forgive you for sins, which the Torah tells you is only forgivable by going to your fellow man. So what's it all about? And I can't prove this, but I think what it's all about is, yes, from a technical perspective, if you harmed your friend, you can't get forgiveness from God until you go and make it right with your friend. But what does God want most from us on Yom Kippur? He's not asking us to say we're going to keep Shabbos better or kashrut better or have more kavanah when we're davening. He asks us to become better people. We're focused on, we say again and again, God, I'm going to try and harm my friend less. I'm going to try and be more yashar, more straight in business. And again, I think this idea of tikkun olam, of repairing the world, has gotten a bad rap in Orthodoxy because it became the mantra of the Reform movement a long time ago, to the exclusion of ritual. Orthodox want to move far away from that, but it's really correct. The purpose of living a God-centered world and of keeping the rituals is to help make the world a better place. And so I encourage youngsters to get more involved in their own communities, and you'll find opportunities to give that'll both help people and, as we said before, make you feel really, really good and feel like you're accomplishing and you're growing and you're thriving.
Thank you so much for that message, and also explaining beautifully, what is if we're keeping Shabbat and if we're doing better learning and doing all of these rituals to enhance and to deepen our relationship with our Creator. Obviously, we're trying to get closer to God, but the net effect of getting closer to God should make us better people to other people. And that's how, because I've always wondered, how would a Hasidic Jew say that they're right? How is if a Hasidic Jew is, or someone who's living a more of a religiously insular life, or just an insular life in general, how is that person making the world? So they would say, I would imagine, that by keeping the mitzvot, it is perfecting them, it is refining them. So now they're dealing with other people on a much, much higher level, and in that way, they're making the world a better place. So it's a really excellent point, and I give you a huge yishakach, just like
for a while. One thing more came to mind. We'll take it to this past week's parsha for a minute.
Yeah.
Right. Famous Rashi, one of the most famous Rashis. Yaakov Avinu says, "In Lavan garti." I lived with Lavan, and what does Rashi say? Rashi says, "V'taryag mitzvah shamarti," and I lived with Lavan. Yet, despite Lavan's bad influence, I kept taryag mitzvahs. Now, whatever, I don't want to get into what it means that Yaakov Avinu kept all the mitzvahs before Sinai. That's a whole different topic. But people ignore the second half of the Rashi. The Rashi says, "In Lavan garti v'taryag mitzvah shamarti below limadti mimaisim haran." Something like that, shall Lavan, something like that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So Rav Frand asks, I don't understand. So listen, Rabbi Sachar Frand.
Let's translate, meaning that I lived with Lavan all these years. I kept the 613, and I did not learn from the evil or bad ways of Lavan because he was a cheat.
That's right.
Continue.
Rabbi Sachar Frand says, I don't understand. If someone kept the mitzvahs, and a lot of the mitzvahs is hafta sager, loving the stranger, and etc., right? How's it possible? Isn't it redundant? Doesn't that by definition mean that I was a good person and didn't learn from the evil ways of Lavan? And the lesson that Rashi is teaching us here is no. One could be in fulfillment of the technical aspects of every single mitzvah, all 613, and miss the whole point. They could still be a lousy person. They could still not treat people with the proper respect. they could still not be giving of their time and their money, right? So that's a very important lesson that if and the Navi says this, the prophets say this, God doesn't, for people that loot and steal and are bad people, God doesn't want their sacrifices, doesn't want their Shabbos, doesn't want their kashrut, right? So we have to know, what's the purpose of the rituals? The purpose of the rituals is to refine us and make us better people. If they don't make us better people, then we're missing the whole point of why we have to keep the commandments.
Yeah, and we're probably not, there's something off there. There's something off there, 100%. That's a beautiful teaching. So you, in other words, the first part of the teaching that I kept the 613, but I also didn't learn from his bad ways. One is not necessarily implicit from the other, which is a really, really powerful idea. Ramban, the great Nachmanides, wrote this, that you could be a novel b'shut haTorah, you could be a despicable person within the domain of the Torah, following all the rules and laws, but it's not having the desired impact. It's not perfecting us. Wow, I didn't really expect it to. I thought we were going to talk about poker and gambling. I didn't realize
poker is not the lesson here. It's not. I was quoted in one of the articles, and I really mean it. Yes, I'm very happy I won this poker tournament, but I don't view that as, on my tombstone. I don't want it to say he won a World Series of Poker bracelet. I want what's behind it. What the encouraging to give other people, the sanctifying of God's name, making Kiddush Hashem, and other things. We didn't even, I'm sure we're out of time. We haven't talked about all the things I've done previously to this. I've been very involved in the Jewish community in many different ways. You probably don't remember, Rabbi Wildes. We met, I'm going to say about 15 years ago now. Maybe it was a little less. I had a particular issue that I need help. You spent 2 hours with me in your office. I don't expect you to remember. I did send a $1,000 donation in afterwards as a measure of Hakarat Hatov. So I'm my one and only donation to the Manhattan Jewish Experience.
That'll just be the first, please God.
I'm sorry?
That'll just be the first, of course.
Of course.
15 years ago?
Yep, you spent 2 hours with me in your office. I remember very vividly. We were talking about a particular issue. I can remind you offline about what it was about.
Okay, well, we should. We got to you through Rachel, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
You did, yes. I was friendly with someone, an Orthodox blogger in the poker community.
In the poker community. Okay, good. So we have to continue this offline, 100%. This podcast has brought me back to a lot of very, very special people, I have to say, who I haven't spoken to in a long time. So I'm a big believer that when things that looked like they're happening randomly are really meant to be. So this was very, very special for me and for our listeners to be able to hear from you. You're doing amazing things for the Jewish people. Tell us just before, because you just alluded to it, what would you say your greatest passion? What area of Jewish communal involvement has been your greatest passion? Because I know you're in a lot of different things.
Right, the realm of Jewish education, particularly the realm of affordability for young parents to be able to afford to send their children to yeshiva day schools, which is really key to the continuity of the Jewish people. Costs have been spiraling out of control for not necessarily for bad reasons, but actually about 10 years ago started a new kind of yeshiva day school in Teaneck, New Jersey, called Yeshivat Ha'atid.
Oh,
the
sure.
Yeshiva of the future. So I was the founder behind that and spent a lot of, well, that's a good combination of where I spent both time and money to make that a reality. And today it's a thriving institution.
It's thriving, and you should just know, Gershon, that I've been gauging success, my success, MJE's success, on how many of our graduates will send their kids to day school, even though they didn't go themselves because they weren't raised in this kind of community. Ha'atid, which is the amazing institution that you started, is giving a chance for people that don't have the kind of money, who want to send their kids to day school, been turned on to Judaism, but don't have the $25,000, $30,000 a year that a day school could cost. They don't all cost that, by the way, but many of them can. And Ha'atid is a phenomenal alternative, and to be able to get the same wonderful Jewish day school experience.
Yeah, it's really it's It is the same wonderful, and I would argue it's even better at a 40% lower cost, and I don't have time to go into how we do that. My one disappointment, though, and people can contact me if they're interested, is that it hasn't caught on in other communities. There are ways of doing innovative things in a more cost-effective manner, and it can only benefit our community in the long run.
Oh, I can't even tell you. It's the elephant in the room when I'm meeting with young couples, because my wife and I do a lot of work also with young couples. I just married a couple last night, our 345th couple that's met at MJE. Hannah and Harlan Patel. It was a beautiful wedding, and even if a person has that kind of money, they may not value Jewish education to that degree to be able. You mentioned tefillin before. I've bought tefillin for people who making a lot more money than I'll ever make in my life, because it wasn't an interest to them. And then later on, once it becomes an interest, they'll pay it back or pay it forward. It's such an important thing to be able to somehow get those costs down. And I do remember now that you're connected with Hatzi. That's really incredible. I've literally spoken to students about that school, and it should be. I wish it was a national or international kind of institution where every community has that kind of option.
Well, it's right over the bridge for you, Rabbi Wildes. So you should visit it. You should visit it at some point. You'll see it's very innovative, very different educational model. You think it's better, and it's been around now. It's had a couple of students go to high school. Their acceptance rates are higher than the general population. And parents are generally very happy. But it's worth seeing in action. It's harder to describe than to see.
I know it from students who might have sent their kids there, but I probably should go see it. You're right. It's so incredibly important to be able to do that. I'll tell you one thing, you'll appreciate this. There was we tried our hand years ago at a Hebrew school at MJE. It was called MJE for Youth. Make your child's bar/bat mitzvah the beginning, not the end. And I had this one boy who was coming, and I remember we had an event for the parents to be able to meet the parents of the kids that were coming to the school. So this one woman came over to me and she said, you brought those rabbis in to make a shofar. We brought Chabad in before Rosh Hashanah to do like shofar making. She goes, right. Well, my son goes to St. Francis here on the Upper West Side. And he brought his shofar with him that he made here at MJE for Youth. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because, well, he's got these Franciscan monks are his teachers, and one of the monks felt bad. They have to go to mass every morning. He's a Jewish kid, and he was holding his shofar. So the monk was trying to be like inclusive. It's the Upper West Side, even in a Catholic school. And he said, if you want to blow the shofar, so my son blew the shofar so well that he's been doing it every morning at mass. So I said, well, first of all, it gives me a lot of nachas that MG produced the first Baal Tokea for St. Francis. But I said to the woman, why are you sending your son to a Catholic school? He's Jewish. I said, Rabbi, I would love to send my son to a Jewish school, but do you know what the Jewish schools cost? So, and I ended up raising a couple of dollars and we tried getting and now why is St. Francis? And she wouldn't send him to a public school because the public schools in the city aren't so great. They're better in the burbs in certain areas. But when she told me what the tuition was, because the Archdiocese of New York funds their schools, and our equivalent to the Archdiocese of New York does not. And we leave it up to the parents themselves. And
100%. Look, that's the only real solution, is it has to become communal funded. Just like the Gemara actually says in Gamla, that it's not the responsibility of a parent, responsibility of a community. I actually started something called NNJ Kids back in 2009 in New Jersey, that we'd ask everyone in the community to have an automatic payment from their credit card every month to support the local day schools. They had some moderate success. We had about 30% of the population signed up for it at one point. Mm-hmm. But that's the real answer. The real answer is communal funding. It should not. And by the way, in this regard, the American system is correct, right? You pay the same property taxes, or in the city income taxes, whether you have 0 kids or 10 kids in the public school system.
Right.
That's the right way to go about it. The more children that you have, and we want to encourage people to have large families and contribute to the growing of the Jewish people, the more a financial burden is upon you. And yes, it is the number one. I know you deal with youth probably more, definitely more than I do. But when I talk to young people, it's not even, it's bad enough they talk about limiting the size of their families and because they know they can't afford it. It's the choice of careers too. I mean, there just aren't that many people feel like they have to be on Wall Street or a lawyer, and if someone wants to do something that speaks to them, is interested of them, but it doesn't make a lot of money, they feel like they have no place in our community. And that's a really terrible place for us to be in, and probably the biggest threat to the next generation of modern Orthodox Jews thriving.
100%. I'm going through this with my kids right now. If you want your kids to be able to stay in the tri-state area and live sort of a modern Orthodox life or whatever, it's expensive, man. And it's so we have to get into the UJA and we have to change their priorities. The only way to do that is to really get involved. But the archdiocese, I mean, there's something to learn from them. If we really value Jewish education, to have almost nothing from the $400 million a year that the New York Jewish community raises going to Jewish schools, there's something off about that.
100%.
Well, I didn't expect to get into this conversation with you, but you want to know something? This is a great passion, and we should continue this because you're doing amazing things, and kol hakavod with your work with Hatid. I'm sure there's a lot of other things, if I picked your brain a little longer, would come out. But thank you so much, and kol hakavod for really publicizing one of the greatest mitzvot in the Torah, which is to give. And I love how you really opened it up, not just money, but time. So that really can be inclusive of our audience. And also just to say once again that, the Gemara says, the Talmud says, ha'ani afilu hamitparnes ala tamchui, that if someone is so poor that even if they are being sustained by the tamchui, which was like the ancient equivalent of a soup kitchen, they still need to give some tzedakah. Right. And getting into the habit of giving, and what I just read from my book before, and what you were saying about how wonderful it feels and just keeps us alive, and hava, love comes from giving. This is just so fundamental to forget about Jewish, just being human. So you're bringing something incredible out through a little poker game. And I think that's pretty unbelievable. So Hashem should continue to bless you with success at the poker table, at Alliance, at everything that you do, and certainly your amazing work with the Jewish community and with your family. Thank you so much for your time, Gershon. I'll get your number from Rachel. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much for having me, Rabbi Wildes. It was a pleasure.
Really, thank you so much, and the best of luck. Let's see if we can just tell. I think we're going to have to turn off here, or else it's going to keep recording us.
All right, we'll be in touch.
Okay, good. I'll give you a call.
Okay. Kol tov.